Thanks for joining Sapelo Nerds, a coastal science podcast. I'm your host, Corinne.
And I'm your host, Brittany. And we work at the National Estuary Research Reserve, or SINERR, on Sapelo Island, a Georgia barrier island.
Today, I'd like to talk a little bit more about one role our estuaries play. They are nature's nursery.
A nursery like for babies?
Exactly. Estuaries are the perfect protected places for marine species to develop. Just like a nursery for plants or people keeps young safe from harm and helps them grow until they are ready to venture out into the world.
So what makes an estuary such a good nursery?
Well, if you look out over our salt marsh, you can see this big, beautiful blanket of grass broken up by tendrils of water that stretch to larger creeks and connect to even larger rivers before flowing into the ocean. Within the small creeks and tendrils of water are tons of hiding places for young marine organisms to avoid larger predators such as dolphins, sharks, stingrays, and other large fish. Not only can they avoid predation, young organisms also have a lot of food available within estuaries.
Right! There are a lot of primary producers in an estuary. Producers are the base of the food web since they are able to make their own energy. Obviously, all of the visible plants in the marsh are producers, but it's the plants that we can't see that are the most important for young marine organisms. Many marine organisms start their life with a planktonic stage before developing into their adult form. Being planktonic means that they float or drift with the water and can often be too small to see with our naked eye. Animals that are planktonic are called zooplankton versus phytoplankton, which are plant-like plankton.
These phytoplankton form the base of many marine food webs. Some phytoplankton are bacteria, some are protists, and most are single-celled plants. Among the common kinds are cyanobacteria, silica-encased diatoms, dinoflagellates, green algae, and chalk-coated coccolithophores. Zooplankton like copepods, tintinids, and young larval fish, crabs, and shrimp eat phytoplankton. Filter feeders such as oysters and sea squirts will eat any plankton that comes close enough to them. And larger animals such as anchovies, bass, jellyfish, all the way up to baleen whales rely on plankton as their main food source.
But some plankton can be harmful, right? They cause harmful algal blooms.
Yes, some phytoplankton species can produce toxins that can cause fish or even people to get sick. Or if we do have a large algal bloom, it can cause low oxygen levels in the water, which can be deadly to the marine organisms. Fortunately, here in Georgia, our tides keep the water really well mixed, so we don't have to worry about harmful algal blooms much.
Okay, so there's a ton of plankton and other food available for young marine mammals in the marsh. What kind of marine species use the marsh when they're young?
Great question. One of the most important species in our marshes to our coastal economy is shrimp. We have two primary species of shrimp on our coast, white and brown shrimp. Unfortunately, we also have something called black gill disease. Black gill is a parasitic infection affecting shrimp on the Georgia coast. The University of Georgia's Skidaway Institute of Oceanography is collaborating with the University of Georgia's Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant, the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Coastal Resources Division, and several other organizations to conduct research on this condition and how it is impacting our economy. This is very important since shrimp are Georgia's most valuable seafood crop, and during most years they account for more than 80% of seafood landings value, or the total value of caught seafood per year. In 2020, the shrimp season brought in over 3 million pounds of shrimp. That brought a dockside value of $13 million paid to shrimpers.
Wow, that is a lot of shrimp. So the shrimp boats are catching the adult shrimp off of our shores, but the young shrimp spend their time in the marsh hiding from predators and feeding. Since shrimp are scavengers, they are acting as nature's garbage collectors, feeding on dead or decaying matter like detritus.
Yep, and detritus is a huge component of our marsh. Our marsh mud is made up of detritus, or broken down organic matter that's full of nutrients. Pluff mud, also known as plow mud, is a dark to light brown, gooey, soft mud and can sometimes be clay-like in appearance and consistency. The name plow mud originated in the early 1800s when coastal planters began using the nutrient-rich substance as a fertilizer and would plow, then spelled P-L-O-U-G-H, it into the fields. No one is really sure how it then evolved into pluff.
It can get pretty smelly at times in the marsh, but that's due to the bacteria. A smelly marsh is a healthy marsh. If you've visited or live in coastal Georgia, you definitely recognize that marsh smell. All that bacteria adds up to having a really healthy ecosystem. One well-known scientist that conducted research on sapelo, Dr. John Teal, developed a food web based on detritus. He found out that any dead and partially decomposed Spartina from our marshes is actually more nutritious than non-decomposed Spartina because the bacteria on it provides extra protein.
I guess that makes it a really enticing food for a lot of animals. Feeding on dead Spartina is actually what gives our shrimp their slightly sweet flavor compared to other shrimp. There are other animals that feed on detritus too, like the fiddler crabs crawling on our marsh, which are then eaten by diamondback terrapins, wading birds, burrfish, and lots of other fish. The estuarine food web is one of the most complex habitats to map, with a complicated mix of contributions from marine and freshwater inputs, diverse feeding preferences based off of intertidal and subtidal locations, different life stages altering species diets, and with severe human impacts playing a key role, such as eutrophication, climate change, invasive species, and habitat loss. The vast number of different species that call the estuary home are all intricately connected and are therefore all impacted when changes occur.
Maybe our guest today can help us talk about some of the numerous species that grow up in our marsh. I'd like to introduce Harrison Folk, a student at the College of Coastal Georgia studying marine science. Harrison is also a children's book author. Thanks for joining us, Harrison.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Harrison, welcome. Brittany and I met you as an intern on one of SINERR's Estuarine Fish Monitoring Cooperative trawls. And as a reminder to our listeners, those EFMC trawls aim to learn more about which fish use our estuaries. So, Harrison, you received the David Harrington Scholarship to participate in this internship through the University of Georgia's Marine Extension and Georgia Sea Grant. What got you interested in joining the trawls?
Having been raised right here in our own local estuary, I was always deeply interested in the amazing habitat that exists right in my own backyard. I mean, how many people do you know that have sharks living right outside their house? I first learned about EFMC trawls in my marine and estuarine fisheries class this spring, and I knew right away that I couldn't miss my chance with such valuable field experience and an opportunity to sample our local estuarine community.
I can relate to that. Growing up in this environment really makes you want to share your beautiful home with others. You wrote a children's book that clearly demonstrates your passion for marine life. Your book, Team Submarine, is available on Kindle and covers a lot of information about a number of different habitats. How does that connect to our estuaries?
Team Submarine's plot revolves around real-world marine science, environmental issues, and conservation practices, which range all the way from marine plastic pollution, invasive lionfish, and even oyster reef restoration, right here in our own salt marshes at the beginning of the story.
That's so cool. We are really lucky in Georgia to have so much healthy marsh. Oysters are a big part of that since they are a keystone species, providing habitat, stabilization, and food for a lot of animals. You mentioned an impressive number of species in Team Submarine. Do you remember how many?
Yeah, there are 157 species in the first book, including many who use estuaries as their nurseries, such as the red drum, northern white shrimp, and Atlantic menhaden, for example. The Team Submarine sequel I'm currently working on is going to bring 170 entirely new creatures to the total count, which will bring it to 327 species across the two books.
Wow, I'm really looking forward to seeing the new species in your second book. That is amazing that you were able to share your knowledge of so many different species, and with so many of them relying on estuaries for development and survival. NOAA estimates that estuaries provide habitat for around 70% of the United States commercial fish catch, and even more for the recreational fish catch. Our EFMC trawls have collected data for over a year now to learn more about specific young fish species using the estuaries around Sapelo Island. We've been working with the UGA Marine Extension, Georgia Sea Grant, and the University of Georgia Marine Institute to conduct these trawls. What is the coolest thing that you've seen so far on a trawl, Harrison?
Well, the chain pipefish was a real surprise to encounter. Even mixing with everything else in the fish pile, its unmistakable snout and shoestring-thin body made it instantly recognizable as something really unique. Pipefish and the relatives of seahorses and sea dragons generally prefer the coverage of dense, weedy, or otherwise reefy habitats, so it makes sense that we pulled up a lot of sea whip alongside it.
It's always a surprise to see what we pull up. It could be a giant mud ball, a bunch of jellyfish, or over 1,000 fish, and we have to count every single one. So, Harrison, what's next for you and Team Submarine?
I'm really excited that I'll be continuing my EFMC trawl internship throughout the rest of the year. I've had an incredible time working with everyone involved in the program, and and the experience I gained from this internship will translate well to future marine science projects. As for Team Submarine, I will continue my development cycle on the sequel book, which will pick up immediately after the ending events of the first story, before going all the way down to the bottom of the deep sea. I have an incredible set of rarely seen deep sea animals picked out, and I can't wait to introduce them all to the readers.
That's great! We look forward to hearing more about their adventures and seeing you on more trawls. Thanks for being here!
Thank you both so much for having me. Catch you later.
So, Brittany, since we've talked about all the food in our nursery-like estuaries, have you heard about the restaurant that caters exclusively to dolphins?
No, what about it?
It only has one customer, but at least it serves a porpoise.
Wow, really split my gills on that one. All this nursery talk had me thinking, why was the young shrimp given detention?
I don't know. Why?
Because he was being shellfish.
For more information about any of the topics we covered today, or to submit your question that may be featured in our upcoming episodes, please email us at SINERR.socials@gmail.com. That's SINERR.socials@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening to Sapelo Nerds, a coastal science podcast brought to you by the Sapelo Island National Estuarine Research Reserve. Please check back for more episodes released on the 1st and the 15th of each month.
And that's the Sapelo Sound.